Celtic loanee Marco Tilio is having an extraordinary back end to this A-League season, and it all culminated in a special performance in this weekend's win over Western United in the first leg of the semi-final.
We all know, I think I've spoken so many times about Tils over the course of the season. You know, on his day, when he's on, he's definitely the best winger in the competition. So
get together at the back of the 6-yard box. Here's the delivery from Tilio, and it's headed in!
Where do you think you'll be in 1 year's time?
I'd hope to be saying I'll be playing consistently over in Europe, I'd like to say.
So he can score, he can make assists, he's a great dribbler, he's clever, all those things that make him a very, very good player.
Tilio is carving up the A-League again, but does he have the ability to bring another championship to Melbourne City? And does he have it in him to bring a level of consistency to Europe in season 25-26? Today I'm joined by Christian Montegan and Jacob Stevens to look back on both A-League semi-finals, the first of which saw Western United fall 3-0 at the hands of Melbourne City. But does John Aloisi's team have a comeback left in them still? Melbourne Victory and Auckland FC played out a fierce finals contest on Saturday night, but Auckland's one-dimensional style, at least according to Daniel Arzani, saw them take a 1-0 lead back to New Zealand next week. Elsewhere, the Dub Grand Final ends in a penalty shootout. The rumour mill is in full swing as we get into transfer season, and Tony Popovic selects his Socceroos for a training camp ahead of next month's crucial World Cup qualifiers on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil. Joining me tonight is Jacob Stevens. Hello.
Hello, Lockie. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And Christian Montegan, hello to you.
Hello, Lockie. Good to see you both again.
Very good, very good. It's been an exciting first week of A-League finals football. Obviously, we'll start with Marco Tilio and Melbourne City's 3-0 triumph over Western United. Jacob, he's a player that obviously Australians have had high stocks on him for a little while, but he's had his troubles with injury both here and abroad. He missed the first half, or most of the first half of this season with another injury, but he's rehabbed, he's come back, he's got himself right, and his last 4 to 6 weeks, as his coach Aurelia Vidmar has been saying, has been exceptional, and that all came home to roost with a very, very good performance in an A-League finals match on Friday night.
Yeah, and we pointed him out as well on Thursday, talking about the impact that he might have as that sort of player that can come in and really change the game in favour of your team. And that's exactly what he did. I think we saw him at his best in this one. Just the way he's able to, when he's on the ball, just create chances from what seemed like pretty insignificant moments of possession. It's incredible to watch, and it just goes to show the talent that he does have, and potentially how much Melbourne City have missed him, with all the injuries that he's had and stuff, because you think about City's big struggle this year really has been putting the ball in the back of the net, and you almost sort of wonder, could they have taken the fight to Auckland throughout the season had they had a reliable attacking player of Tilio's quality? Obviously we don't know, but I think it's fair to say that he would have been a really big boost for them throughout most of that regular season. So the fact that he's back, they'll be very, very pleased with that, and the fact that he's performing as well as he is as well is the other key thing, because he's come straight back into the squad, and it looks like he hasn't really missed much of a step, right? He's performing at a good level. He's got good link up play. I mean, we saw it with Lecky there, played that nice ball in for him to put into the back of the net. It seems like he's the perfect fit for the side, and you really sort of feel his absence, I suppose, when he's not there. Look, he's given them that massive advantage now heading into the second leg. I was going to say it'll be away from home, but it won't be. But
Exact same place.
Exact same place. And I think technically, did Western have the first leg at home technically anyway?
Yes,
So
it was
it
technically a Western United game.
Wouldn't have been away anyway, but you get my point. They take a 3-goal lead into that second leg, and in large part due to the fact that Tilio was just, throughout that game, just absolutely on top of it. So, it's awesome to watch him play like that, and I'm sure City will be very happy to have him back.
So we heard Simon Hill's call of the first assist off the corner for Paramount Plus, and then he played that ball in as you say for Matt Leckie. It actually ended up to Jonathan Cohen. It just kind of bounced into the path of Matt Leckie, who finished it off. And Christian, just all around in this game, he was back to his best. He was quick, he was nimble, he was providing that link up, as Jacob was saying. The other clip we played in there was from Optus Sports Takes from the Terrace, and he was talking about where he would be in a year's time, and he wants to be back in Europe and playing consistently. And obviously he's still got 3 years to run on that Celtic contract. So, you know, he's obviously that's like base camp in a way. Like he'll go back to Celtic, and maybe it's a loan move out to a different European club. Obviously the chance to come back to City is still there as well, or he could be playing for the Hoops next year.
Yeah, it's very risky though. If you're thinking about it from a World Cup perspective, right? This is a World Cup cycle coming up next year. If you move to a new environment, does that hamper your chances at all? Because you have to think, right? If he gets loaned out to another club somewhere in Europe, for example, you've got to think, am I going to fit in, adequately for the first few months? Is it going to take me a lot of time to settle in? These are all the variables that you have to consider if you want to put your hand up for selection for the Socceroos if Australia do happen to qualify. So it is a massive decision he's got to make. If I was him personally, I would stay at City for another season just because of the World Cup. I know people would probably disagree. They'd want Tilio to try and, increase, his potential elsewhere in Europe, which is more than fair enough because that's what he deserves. He deserves to take that next step up for sure. But I'm just thinking from like a World Cup cycle, it's very, like I said, risky. And yeah, I think Tony Popovich, I don't know what he'd be thinking. I don't know, if
he'd probably be thinking, please stay fit.
Well, yeah.
I think that's the riskiest thing about Tilio is that there's no guarantee he's going to be fit in 6 months' time.
But it's another thing to get consistent minutes, right? You can stay fit as much as you want, but if you're not being favoured ahead of other wingers in a team, wherever he may choose or he lands, then that's a completely different discussion. So you guys know I follow Milan. Christian Pulisic is there. Milan have no European football next season. That's another big discussion, right? Like, does Pulisic move? Does he risk going to like an environment where he might not settle, which he has done in the past? And that's the exact same for Tilio, right? So that's what he has to take into consideration. But I thought Vidmar's comments after the game in his press conference was pretty good because he was sort of hyping up Tilio a bit, saying he does all these good things on the ball, good dribbler, creates space, this and that. And then towards the end, I thought he sort of tried to retract a bit. He was saying a bit too much, try not to get Tilio a big head. And he was saying, all that stuff, yeah. So I thought that was quite funny. But I think, it's up to Tilio at the end of the day. I think we all know he's got the potential to take that next step. But like I said, I think the World Cup is just surely in the back of his mind. That's, going to be playing, quite a bit on him.
It would be rolling the dice, isn't it? But you think about who's selecting you and a guy, Tony Popovich, and you think, is he going to look too favourably on someone taking what may be perceived as the easy path and the comfortable path, staying at Melbourne City where you'd be guaranteed to get minutes everywhere, but taking the next step up in Europe? If you can do that and be successful, then he's an absolute no-brainer to be in that squad for the World Cup. It's going to be fascinating to see. In terms of the rest of the game, obviously it finished 3-0 to City, but Jacob, it didn't feel like Western actually played that bad. I think Aurelia Vidmar kind of admitted the same in his post-match. He said that City probably scored their goals at the right moments just to kind of stifle what was happening with Western. Pretty much everything you two were saying when we previewed this game last week came true. Both teams pressed very well. Both teams tried to play out from the back. Western's press, they just didn't allow all of the Melbourne City possession that they did have in the first half. It was a big number, but not necessarily high up the field. And the way they set up, they kind of stifled that ability for City to work through the midfield. We talked about how they had that midfield advantage playing the 3 against the 4-4-2 of Western with only 2 central midfielders. I thought Angus Thurgate had a really, really good game, winning his duels against Ali Lapane in that kind of midfield area. It didn't allow City to exit through there. And then with their front 2 of Michael Roos and Hiroshi Iwasuki, who we'll talk about their composition in a sec, but defending really narrow and tight and not allowing Zane Schreiber to get the ball too much in defensive midfield, which should have been their extra number advantage there. So by taking him out of the play, it almost felt like as they were shifting the ball across the field, it was actually kind of even numbers in different areas. And they had 2 really good chances at the end of the first half as well that they failed to capitalise on. And all of a sudden it just becomes about those moments in a game of football, Jacob, where Western United didn't score. City took their opportunities and you stack them up over 90 minutes and it resulted in a 3-0 lead.
Yeah, I think Western, it was a decent game plan from them, but just, perhaps a little bit unfortunate that they conceded in these kind of pivotal moments of the game state that kind of just ruined the occasion for them a bit. I thought, I did touch on Thursday about that midfield press for Western and how important that was going to be, and whether or not City could break through that could potentially dictate the way that the game went. And as you kind of touched on, they didn't really do it all that often. They were kind of reliant on other ways to try and get around it. And I think that that's a credit to the way that Western set themselves up and the way that they play football, because it's really effective, even with just two midfielders. They go man for man, just super aggressive and really hard. And like you mentioned there, keeping those two strikers narrow, cuts out that central channel completely. So where Western have struggled a lot this year is in those wider areas. And coming into the game, I thought City might have had an advantage there. They use a lot of double width where they get their fullback and their wingers, both in those wider areas higher up the pitch to try and exploit that space. But it just wasn't super effective in this one. So look, I think that Western, that they can feel perhaps a little bit hard done by, but also I don't think you could say that any of City's goals were necessarily undeserved. I mean, that Cohen one in particular, I think, you just go, that's just a great finish. What can you do about that? There's not too many complaints you can have about that. So yes, Western played well, but I think that what they need to do is, they know they're going to, if they know they're going to win that midfield battle, they need to, I suppose, formulate a way in which they're going to turn some of those turnovers and those repossessions in that middle third, that final third, into actual opportunities to really threaten City. Obviously, they have to do it with being three goals down. And a lot of people were critical of the starting strikers that they had, of course, being Ibasuki and Roos, who Ibasuki's had a good season. Roos has been a little bit hit or miss, as he has been most of his career, to be honest. And obviously Noah Botic, I believe, was nursing an injury, though, which is the reason why he wasn't starting. But a lot of people thought maybe they won't be able to capitalise because they don't have that spark, that sort of acceleration and explosion in that final third, where you can turn those balls over, high up the pitch, win it back, and then just explode forwards and really capitalise from those opportunities. So maybe it's a rethink from Aloisi heading into the second leg as to how he wants his final third to really look and operate. Whether it's a case of getting players like Abel Wallity up there because he's got that sort of pace to get in behind quickly. I don't know what the solution is, but they're going to have to figure something out, because they did really well to win the midfield battle. It's just a little bit disappointing that, they couldn't keep the ball out the back of their net. And, I don't remember there being any egregiously bad defending either. So it's just one of those ones where, it is what it is. Like, Gariccio hasn't been the best defensively all year long, but with Lecky's goal, he was actually the one, I believe, that kind of caused Cohen to have that little bit of a mistouch and a misstep, and then the ball just falls to Lecky. So there's not much you can do about that. It's just unfortunate. So it's a difficult one to try and fight back from for Western United, and City will be extremely comfortable heading into that second leg, because we know their defence is very solid. They don't concede a lot of goals, and we know that they can just shut down a game and really control it, both in and out of possession. So I think there's going to need to be a rethink from Aloisi, particularly looking at that final third, in terms of how he wants to capitalise on those transition moments, because that's where it's going to be won or lost for them.
Yes, I think you're spot on with that Leckie goal, because even though the ball's going over the back of Garuccio's head, he does just enough to kind of get kind of in the eyesight of Jonathan Cohen, who's trying to receive the ball, and Garuccio does enough to actually affect the touch, and it kind of just bobbles in front of him, and then it spills out to Matt Leckie. Like, there's not much more you can do about it. And it was just kind of those moments of quality that City were able to capitalise on. Like, Christian, we talked about the Tilio balls. The Cohen finish was, as you say, Jacob, exceptional, off a little bit of a bobble as well. We had a perfect angle of that in the press box, just straight into the top corner. It was beautiful. Matt Leckie with his opportunity. Even at the other end, Kai Truan making that massive challenge right at the end on, I think, Ollie Laval, who came on towards the end of the game. And where City were able to take those moments for Western United, the one player who's been providing their moments of quality, Noah Botic, who played that ball through for Laval, he was on the bench. And as you say, rightly, a little bit of a quad niggle, wasn't fit to take part in the game. I think part of the reasoning behind that, Christian, is, Aloisi would have hoped that this tie had probably been a little bit closer, and then if you give Botic that extra time to rest, then he's going to be able to, affect the game a lot more in the second leg. However, it appears that he maybe have left that a little bit too late, and it's 3 goals is a pretty big mountain to overcome, especially against what is the best defensive side in the competition.
Yeah, I mean, always good to look in hindsight and think, okay, I would have played Botic from the start. But again, we don't know how serious that injury was heading in, right? I mean, if he started him, might have got injured after 5 minutes, early sub, and that changes the game as well. So you just don't know. It's just unfortunate that the game or the tie has really gone away from them now, 3-0 down. It's going to be very, very difficult to see them. I can see them scoring 3, like maybe like a slight chance, but on the other end defensively, you just can't see West United keeping a clean sheet. Not with the likes of Telio being such in great form. So I don't know how Aloisi is going to approach this second leg, whether he changes his formation slightly, because we know he's really keen on this back four. He doesn't really change in terms of that defensive shape. I don't know. Is he going to have to try and play more with wing backs? He has to try and push numbers forward and get a couple of goals early, at least 1 goal. I know, over history, when you're 3-0 down after the first leg, they always say that you have to score an early goal. You have to put pressure on the opposition, because if you head into halftime with, 0-0, for example, you just give City the opportunity to sit back, absorb, do what they do best, defend. So, yeah, but then obviously the flip side of that is you expose yourself, right? And I think during those final stages of that first leg, you saw West United lose their shape a bit, especially in the midfield as well, where Jacob made a great point that they were wrestling with that midfield to try and take control of it. But you're 3-0 down. Obviously, you have to try and at least peg one back, right? You have no real option. And you saw Melbourne City, they probably could have added another goal to the tally. So, yeah, that's where tactics are going to play a big role for Aloisi to try and find that balance. But it's at the same time, it can't be all about balance, right? Because you have to go out and attack and score goals, right? That's going to be the real head scratcher for him heading into it. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating from that front, but I just don't see a contest in the second leg.
It feels like 3-0 is almost the point. Like a 3-goal margin is almost like kitchen sink territory. Like if it's 4, like it's almost definitely, okay, we have to seriously change things up, play with, 8 forwards and just actually really, really properly go for it, right? Otherwise we're going to have no chance. 2-0 is almost like, well, okay, we're going to probably stick with what we know for at least the first 45 minutes and see if, the kind of natural variance of football can get us back into this contest. But 3-0 is almost on that line. I wonder just how much John Aloisi is thinking, Jacob, about really significantly changing how he's setting his side up to try and get himself into a grand final.
Yeah, it gets to that territory, and it gets to the point as well where the mentality shifts from we can win this fixture to we can give ourselves a chance in extra time. I think, that 3 goals is sort of on that precipice as well, where you're sort of thinking, look, we're probably not going to score 4, but we can get 3. If we can keep a clean sheet, we're through to extra time and then anything can happen. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they sort of approach that as well in terms of the mentality. But in terms of the actual squad itself, how he sets it up, look, I'd be surprised to see him really make massive changes, at least structurally. I think that he will continue to go up, because if you're winning the midfield battle, you're winning the midfield battle. That's half the battle won, right? You just need to figure out how you're turning that that sort of field tilt into actual chances further up the pitch. And that's kind of where they struggled. I think kind of both teams didn't really generate a huge number of really big chances. I think they both had like 1.2, 1.3 XG or something like that. And City, Western from memory didn't even have many shots on target. I think maybe only about 4 on target. So
both teams had 4 shots on target, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Well, they both did. City just put it in the net. But like it's about... yes, that's partially luck, but you also make your own luck. I mean, like a great finish from Cohen, that wouldn't have been a particularly high XG chance, but it's just a fantastic finish, puts you in that position. And I think that's maybe where they're lacking, is just raw finishers. Botic has been really the only one that can do that for them this season. I mean, Ibasuki, really good from set pieces with his head, and he can put the ball in the back of the net from a tap in and stuff like that. But even for Adelaide, he wasn't one to take a shot, from much further than about 10 or 11 yards out. So it's sort of, how do you either have to fully commit to just lobbing the ball in as close to the goalkeeper as you can get and hoping for chaos, or you've got to get somebody on the pitch who you know is going to hit the target from dangerous areas. And I just think looking at the lineup that they went with, I don't really see that anywhere that it makes me go, oh yeah, he's going to take a shot and it's going to challenge the keeper. It sort of seems a little bit lackluster. So. But then even looking through the squad that he's got to choose from, again, it's really only Noah Botic that screams that to me. So, yeah, he's got a difficult task ahead of him. I think he might change it to where he might actually slow the game down a little bit and do what I said and try and look to just get the ball into those really high percentage areas and try and capitalize on that rather than rushing through things. But who knows? It'll be interesting to see come the weekend whether they approach it with that mentality in mind of, look, we need to be creating better chances, or whether they go, we just need to take any chances we can get and try and claw back that deficit. Because, yeah, they're in this tricky position where they can't go all out, right, let's just shoot from anywhere because we're 4 or 5 goals down. But they can't also not do that because it's still 3 goals, right? So yeah, it's going to be a difficult balancing act for them. I'd say he'll stick with a 4-4-2. He'll stick with that midfield of Bozanovsky and Thurgate that works so well and with that really intense press. But it's then what he does with possession that I think is going to be the key thing for them. And I just don't quite know what the solution is.
All right, very good. So it's going to be a massive task, obviously, for them to come back 3-0 deficit. And I know we talked about this plenty last week, but if there was ever an advertisement for all of the bad things about 2-legged ties, this is it. We're going back to the same stadium with the same teams in front of an equally vacant Amy Park to play a game that is pretty much over. Get rid of them.
I think it's the problem with the 2 teams more than the double leg semis.
Potentially, but I'm taking my point to the extreme here. Let's go to Saturday night. Melbourne victory, 0 Auckland FC 1. It was an extremely tight, fierce contest. It was finals football, really, at its absolute best. The first attempt, of course, for Steve Corica's Black Knights in an A-League finals series. And it was really Christian Auckland just doing Auckland things yet again. Melbourne victory didn't have a legitimate shot on target all game. There was a couple of offside attempts here and there, but no legitimate attempts. They still haven't scored against Auckland in 3 games this season now. Of course, they're going to have a 4th to try and finally break that spell. The goal came off the back of some really poor defending individually from Casey Boss on the second phase of a long throw, which is a pretty funny subplot, the long throw throughout this game. But it was a really interesting, tense game. And we saw Daniel Arzani speaking out. He called Auckland's one-dimensional style of football. I'm not sure how much you agree with that, but for me, it just felt like a really well-executed game plan. The massive, back 4. It's only the second time I've seen them live, and it really kind of just strikes you just how physically massive all of those defenders are when they line up next to each other. And Victory just turned the ball over in midfield too much for my liking, which led to the chances that Auckland had. And I think they just played a better game of football.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no complaints. They deserve the win the way they're set up. I mean, they went in with the game plan right and they executed. Victory, for all the possession that they had, I think it was like over 60% or something like that for the whole game. It's like, yes, you've got that possession, but what are you going to do with it? Teague, Valadon, these types of players who we know are creative. We're trying to thread the needle a bit, trying to get the ball into wide areas. But yeah, just when the ball was up there, just Auckland the structure was just so good. And that's just been evident throughout the whole season. And when you have that chemistry heading now into finals, it just makes it so seamless, right? And watching it live with you, Lockie, it was like, I think I turned to you and said, midway through the second half, I'm like, I just don't see Victory scoring here. I just do not find, I don't know how they're going to score because Auckland defensively just know how to get the job done. And it just, from a Victory perspective, it needed a moment of brilliance yet again from someone like, I don't know, Azani or Mashash, like what happened against the Wanderers the week before, to try and open the game up a bit, try and create a bit of space, create an opening. Because against this Auckland side, especially the defence, you try and whip balls into the box, it crosses. They've got such tall centre backs and a tall back line in general, right? You try and play through them, they've got the holes, sewed up, so you can't really play through them in that way as well. So Auckland just limit your options to a point where they make the opposition panic. making poor decisions. And to your point, Lockie, that's when Victory were a bit reckless with their possession. Lost the ball a few times with misplaced passes, or they made the wrong decision. And Auckland, from there, they capitalised, and that's what Steve Corica wants, right? Especially away from home, take your opportunities, and they got the well-deserved goal with, got to say, Casey Boss was ball watching there for the goal they conceded, so he'll be very disappointed with that. I'm sure Arthur Dillis will be as well. But yeah, heading into this second leg now, going to New Zealand in front of a sellout home crowd. It's all with Auckland now, and it's up to Victory. How are they going to respond? They've got to look at the tape and think, okay, how on earth are we going to break down this defence now? It's going to be a tall order. You mentioned, Lockie, they haven't scored against them yet this season, and they're going to have to if they want to progress to the grand final.
Less than 1,000 tickets left for a game that the capacity is 30,000. So that's going to be full to the brim on the weekend for sure. Yep. That's going to be an exciting day. Jacob, the one-dimensional line, you can either look at it that way and you can say, okay, you're one-dimensional. The other angle to look at that is that you're keeping things simple and everyone is very clear on the plan that is, the Auckland FC game plan. And you're going out there, and for about 27 odd games so far this season, they've executed that plan pretty well, and they did so again that day.
I think what really annoys me about this comment is that, okay, if they're so one-dimensional, why did you fail to break them down all game? Like, it's not like it's a new dimension that we haven't seen before. This is, like you said, sort of how they played football most of the season. So there's really no excuses. If you're saying they're one-dimensional, you've got to have an answer to it, and you didn't. So you can't really complain too much about it. So, look, Arzani is a tremendous player, and we were talking about he could be a difference maker in this tie. But yeah, as Christian, you kind of touched on there, he just didn't have enough of an impact to be able to break down that Auckland defence. And actually, it kind of reminded me a little bit of a sort of Chiefy performance from Auckland in the way that they controlled the game out of possession. Now, we know that he's spoken about you don't have to have possession of the ball to control the game. And I think Auckland exemplified that here, like, perfectly, right? They just, it didn't feel like Christian says where he mentions to you, halfway through the game, Victory aren't going to score. There was just no feeling of threat from the Victory all game long because Auckland had them shut down the whole time. They were happy to give Victory the ball because they knew nothing was going to come of it. That's controlling a game. You don't necessarily have to have 60, 70, 80% possession to do it. You can sit back and let the opposition just waste time and waste possession all you want, and you're still controlling the game. And I think that's exactly what they did here. So look, scoring against Auckland is a difficult ask. There's only a few teams that have really done it efficiently this season. Western United are one, Adelaide United have scored a fair few as well. And a lot of those are coming in those sort of chaos transitional moments. And I think that's maybe where the Victory, the way they like to play maybe necessarily doesn't quite align with just going all out in transition. I think obviously having Veluplay having a very quiet game, Ozani having a quiet game, Mashash having a quiet game, that limits a lot of your transitional power in the first place. But I just don't think that they necessarily were set up to, or they weren't structured to go and capitalize on those moments in the first place, where that's really the only weakness in this Auckland defense, is that for as big as that backline is, it's not the fastest in the league. So there is going to be space opening up in transition. But then, Victory couldn't even win the midfield battle either. So it's not like they were even getting the ball in those areas to be able to launch into transition in the first place. So as much as Western United need a big change heading into the second fixture to get back 3 goals, I think Victory, there's almost sort of an over-reliance on particular people, really creating a lot of chances and having big threat to actually be able to win games at this point. Like an Arzani, like a Mashash, even Virgos, he can have his moments as well. And I just think if you're lacking those as Victory, what do you turn to and what do you try and do? And I don't think that there's quite enough of that sense of a plan in this team to be able to take it to Auckland. So either they need to change things drastically, in terms of the way that they want to play this game, or one of those key playmakers needs to step up in this away fixture. And Lachlan, I think you mentioned that it was a possibility that Victory were going to do better in this away leg than in this home one. I can't remember what your reasoning was, but I remember you saying, even if they go 1-0 down, I'd still back them to potentially get a result.
I don't know if I've ever been proper named Lachlan on this podcast before. That was a bit of a jolt to the system.
There you go.
I just think with the victory, they're just a team that loves to show up in the big moments and sometimes not show up in the not so big moments. And when you're traveling away, you're going into enemy territory against 30,000 supporters. They're the new kids on the block. You're the established team. You're the giant of the A-League football, and you don't want to let them get one over you. You have to go on the plane. It feels like a big occasion. I just feel mentally that will turn them on more rather than just, another game at Amy Park. I know it's a final. It's not quite another game, but relatively speaking between the two, right? So it's nothing football related. It's not tactical. It's just a kind of gut feeling that I have, especially 1-0 down, right? We know how Australian football teams love to just throw the kind of backs against the wall siege mentality, kind of mindset in the change room. How many times I was listening to the Mariners talking about the women's team after the grand final on the weekend, and one of the first things they said was like, there was so many people that said we wouldn't make finals. It feels like every acceptance speech in football nowadays starts with, this one's for all the people that thought we couldn't get there, right? So I feel like that's the mentality that Victory will now be going into this match with, and I think it could motivate them a little bit more. And I think what they have to do tactically on the field is actually just take a little bit more risk in the final third. Given the amount of possession that they have, especially getting into the final third, Daniel Arzani was saying, hopefully we can get more balls into the final third at the end of that interview. I don't think that was the issue at all. I feel like they were getting the ball into those areas fine enough, but they felt like they were always looking for the perfect pass. And it was a really key moment right towards the end of the game. Victory lose the ball in transition. Auckland go down the other end. It was that double post chance, Jack Duncan, I thought, actually had a pretty good game. Makes himself big and the shot goes post and it spurts out and they go down the other end in transition and they actually look like they have numbers getting forward and they might actually get a shot on target, and they just stall and they can't find the perfect pass for the perfect shot, and they end up recycling the possession and just settles back into normal kind of build-up play again. And They just can't do that for another 90 minutes, especially Christian in a game where they're going to have to now take the onus and go actually bring it to Auckland and actually try and physically score a goal to get back into this match.
It reminds me a bit of last season under Popovich, where they try and almost walk the ball in the back of the net. It's like you just can't be that perfect. There's going to be times where it doesn't have to be all clean and pretty, right? It can just be, again, like one of the problems was, those crosses into the box or set pieces. It's very hard to score goals against Auckland with their tall defense, right? So, like, I'm not saying, don't play possession and pass the ball around, but when the option's there, first time when you see someone, look up, pass the ball, and just be a bit more efficient and proactive. I just thought they were a bit too slow at times, a bit hesitant, and against this Auckland side, you just don't have time, or you can't afford to do that, right? It's just got to be, quick snap. You've just got to, I see that player. It's just got to be just in the back of your mind. It has to be almost, you already know the pass you're going to make before you get the ball, if that makes sense. That's how quick and well-drilled this Victory side have to be against Auckland because of how well set up they are. So, yeah, it's going to be a really big assignment heading over there. But I do agree with you slightly, Lockie, in the sense that in that mentality side of it, we always know Victory do get up for these types of games. But just watching that first leg, you just can't help but think, yes, that's all well and good. But in the final third, if things don't click or they don't find answers or solutions to put the ball in the back of the net, then you just feel as though Auckland are going to find that one opportunity and seize the moment, make it 2-0, and then once it gets to that stage, it's basically curtains.
I think what you were describing there, Christian, those kind of become a little bit of a puzzle for a lot of modern football sides, in that there's almost, I think, a preference not to lose possession and, to not play it safe necessarily, but not take those risks, not play it quickly, slow things down, and just try and slowly work your way in, where I think that if a team is just well structured, that's going to be an incredibly difficult way to try and score. So it's not just Victory that's facing this problem. I think it's a lot of teams that are looking to play, possession-based football where they control the game through just holding the ball, dictating the tempo. This is where that issue comes up again and again. You look at teams like Man City and Arsenal in the Premier League even have this problem when they face a low block, because they just keep possession, but they don't really do anything with it because they don't want to risk losing the ball. I think the Victory either have to say, well, look, we back our defenders, that if we lose the ball in transition, they'll be fine and we can take risks, or go, we back our front line, that if we take these risks, they'll be able to convert them. So, yeah, it's kind of the bane of a lot of football teams at the moment, and I think Victory are just the latest to experience it.
They're going to have some problems with their defence going into this away tie as well. Roderick Miranda was, of course, ruled out before kick-off in this one. He wasn't part of the match day squad in the end. And then, of course, unfortunately, Brandon Hamill does his ACL early in the first half. That's been confirmed by the club. So, obviously, that has massive long-term implications as well. Miranda is not contracted for next season. Hamill now with an ACL, almost certain to miss the start of next season. They're big question marks for the club to deal with in a couple of weeks' time, but for now it means who's going to start in the middle of defence against Auckland. Obviously, you've got Josh Rawlins, who's probably a shoe-in for one of those spots, but is Miranda fit? Are they going to have to look? Lachlan Jackson, who I thought was very good in this game as well. If it's not Roderick Miranda, then Josh Rawlins comes in, but that's a duo that I doubt, apart from the last 20, 30 minutes in this game, has actually played much football together at all. So that's going to be a test for them. A couple other funny moments that I want to touch on. The towel was very funny. So Auckland had these long throws, right? And in the first, this has been a tactic for them all season. We know what's going down. But if you're watching the game, it was a very wet and cold night in Melbourne. And Auckland, I don't know who it was, but someone has gone out and placed towels in plastic bags and dropped them on the sidelines where, these kind of long throws happen. And there was a couple just on the far broadcast side, on the far off the broadcast side. And there was a couple of throw-ins there. Sakai was getting down and pumping him into the box. And I think he accidentally also grabbed the water bottle of the little ball girl that was sitting there and got a little drink. And she was quite protective of her water bottle. But the towel was getting a lot of use for the long balls in. And then just before halftime, we see someone in Victory get up, walking around and picking up the towels and say, "No, thank you very much. That's not for you. We're not going to allow you to dry the ball and get any extra purchase on it for the long throws," which I thought was good. And then Christian, the other one was the pair of Mariners fans that ended up in the away bay with the Auckland FC fans. They brought pretty good travelling support. And the story goes that they were just in the pub before the game, and a couple of Mariners fans who were down in Melbourne for the A-League Women's Grand Final were there as well, and said, "Why don't you come along and join us?" And we got those shots of the two guys and the Mariners get up enjoying a victory loss as well. It was quite entertaining.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I mean, I'm thinking, obviously the Mariners beat Victory in the grand final last season. I don't think those fans would be too envy of Victory if they beat Auckland, but it's good to see that interaction, just those good storylines. And the towel incident was pretty funny as well. Just to see someone from Victory just grab and get the towel, walk away, just walk across behind the goals like nothing's happened. I thought that was quite funny.
That's fine margins, isn't it? Well, the debt was repaid by the Auckland FC faithful. A couple of them then went and cheered on the Central Coast women's team in the A-League Women's Grand Final on Sunday afternoon. And, of course, the Mariners became champions of the A-League Women's competition in 2024-25. It went all the way to a penalty shootout. An early miss from Alana Janchevsky was the difference in the end. Courtney Newbon, the keeper for Victory, had a couple of chances to keep some of the later penalties out, just kind of deflecting off her, but went into the goal, finished 5-4 on pens and the Mariners. And Emily Husband claimed the trophy. Isabel Gomez was the player of the match. She scored the very controversial goal in the semi-final to get past the invincible Melbourne City. That was maybe a metre or two offside, but nothing to be denied about this goal. It was a beauty. She's going into the Matildas camp in a couple of days, I want to say, actually, as
it's
they
not
prepare
far away,
for
is it?
It's very close, their next window. So Of course, if you want to hear a more detailed breakdown of this game, the Dubcast will be out on Wednesday morning with Pauletti and Burke. But another exceptional final, another one held in Melbourne, Jacob. We've got a few up, but I think crucially for the competitive balance of the league, it's the first time, I think, since 2015 that neither Sydney FC, Melbourne City or Melbourne Victory have won the title. So the little club that could gets another trophy for the collection.
I think it's just good to see as well that it's not a case of those teams. I mean, City and Victory in particular ran away in the league this year. Obviously, City invincible, Victory was only 2 losses. And I think there were a lot of people that were kind of resigned to the fact of those are probably the 2 that are going to end up in the final. So, you know, the fact that the Mariners were able to go the long way and you know, get past City in that semi-final, which, look, very, very controversial goal that both coaches have said was offside. But that's what you get in football. We got that all the time pre-VAR. I think people kind of forget that was the thing. And go back and watch
post VAR for the
VAR,
Newcastle grand final.
yeah. Like when VAR isn't working, we still get that. But I mean, go back and watch old football highlights, and you'll be amazed how offside people are. But it's just that's football for you. And you know, I think it's a real good feel-good story for the Mariners to be able to do that. It's a final that goes to penalties. What more can you say about it? It's what you want to see, at least as a neutral fan, you know, to get a high stakes game that goes all the way. A little bit disappointing from Newbon. Like you said, like a few chances there, but just couldn't quite make it stick. And it was the Mariners who were happiest at the end of it all. But no, it was another really good final. Another year where City don't win it after dominating the league, which is kind of becoming a trend for them, and maybe a worrying one. It'll be interesting to see, you know, if that trend continues next season, or if, you know, the Mariners can sort of bounce on from this and go, hang on, we've got a really good team here. Let's make a push, you know, to try and win the Premiership and Championship double as well. But no, great story, great game, and awesome to see one go to penalties, because there's just something about watching a game in penalties. You're just so hyped up the whole time. Obviously, if it's one of your teams that's in it, you're nervous the whole time. But yeah, from that neutral perspective, that's one of the beauties of finals, is you just don't get it anywhere else. So no, it was awesome to see.
Elite tension. It's also, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row now that the away team has won the women's grand final.
Yeah.
So hosting privilege is not all it's cracked up to be. Once again, a little plug for the Dubcast. Pauletti would love me if I reiterate it again. If you get lost, head to the Ramble Australia website. You'll find the links over there. Let's jump into some transfer buzz, we'll say, rather than news specifically, Christian, because we're getting to the end of the season. Obviously, there are plenty of rumours floating about, and the big one to come out from Sydney FC and Perth Glory today, this is per Marco Monteverde, is that Sydney are very keen to sign Adam Taggart to replace Patrick Klamala, the Pole, who has left Sydney FC at the end of his loan deal. There was a couple of little cryptic kind of goodbye messages from him and the club, but it seems as if they have parted ways in the end. But the key kind of part of this is that Sydney FC would be willing to release Joe Lolly the other way to get a deal across the line. Now, they both have a year left on their contracts per transfer marked, but Perth want to play Tags and Lolly at the same time. Who wouldn't, right? So, they're hoping, both sides, that they can get a deal across the line, but it seems like Perth want to have their cake and eat it too. They want Tags and they want Lolly interacting in their final third next season.
Yeah, I'd be very worried if I was Lolly. I'm going to Perth, and then you see Adam Taggart going the other way to Sydney. It's like, I'm only going to Perth if Adam Taggart stays, otherwise I'm not going. Because, the state of that club at the moment, unless some things change, in the off-season, the transfer market, then for Lolly, it's like, what are you here for, right? Are you here for the money, or are you here to win championships and try and make a name for yourself, create a legacy? If that's the case, and he stays at Sydney, right? But the option probably isn't in his hands because of the contract situation over there. For Taggart, I guess it makes sense moving to Sydney. We see the bucket load of goals he scores for a Perth side who, let's face it, struggle at times to create real, goal scoring opportunities, clear cut ones at least. And if you've got a Sydney front line with the quality that they have, and you fit Taggart into there to replace Klimala, then I mean, it's a match made in heaven, really. It's just, the discussion of, should Sydney offload Lolly to get the prize in Taggart? It's a very, I guess, it'll be a big debate among Sydney FC fans. But yeah, like I said, if for Lolly, especially his ambition, I'd be very shocked if he'd want to move to Perth, considering, what is he, early 30s?
31, I
now
think.
in his career, so
2 even
30
maybe.
something, 31. So he's still got a couple of good years left at least in him. I think he can still make a big impact to Sydney. I think that goes without saying. I think it has more to do with the clubs and where they see to take it.
See, I just think I can't see Taggart leaving Perth. Like, I just feel like he's quite happy there.
He loves the city, yeah.
He loves the city. By all accounts, he's taken a, not insignificant, pay cut to go to Perth in the first place, in the back end of his career. It seems like he really just wants to retire there, see out his club career as a legend in Perth, which he has every right to do. That's the thing that, for me, I'm thinking, I just don't see him moving to Sydney. I know you were talking, Christian, about Lolly going to Perth, but I don't see the other side happening either. I just don't think that he really cares that much that he'd want to leave Perth and go to Sydney for a couple of years,
If Taggart's already getting Socceroos call-ups, like, well, would you want to move?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Let me make like a really long bow comparison for this Adam Taggart situation. It's kind of like Harry Kane at Tottenham. Like, do you go away? Do you go to a club where you can maybe win a trophy, or do you stay with the club where you've got the history? I know it's the same league. It's not quite Bayern going overseas, but like, do you want to break like the Perth Glory goal scoring record or something like that, where they've kind of built you up and that's your city, or do you want to go and win something in like the twilight of your career?
Yeah, well. I mean, if Harry Kane's what you're basing it off of, then for Taggart, you'd say, move and win something. But I just think he's really, really happy in Perth. And I think with the Kane situation as well, is that he's always had that tag attached to him of you've never won a trophy. It's because you've always been at Spurs. Whereas I don't think anybody's really critical of Taggart, that he's not been just drowning in trophies in his career. I think it's an interesting comparison. But I don't know, if you are basing it off of Kane, then you'd go for it and you'd make that move and risk it and see what happens. But I just still think he's too happy where he is to think about changing scenery.
The other comparison is that they've got a few new players already lined up. Perth Glory, we've heard about some of them, some Australians. Tottenham also had a very famous Australian coming into the club when Harry Kane was choosing whether to go or stay, in Ange Postecoglou, of course, who we'll definitely be talking about on Friday. He's got his Europa League final against Manchester United on Thursday morning. But fascinating. Joe Lolly as well. There's been rumours for a couple of weeks now that he's no certainty to stay. So I wonder where the club's kind of mindset is on him. He's definitely still one of the best players in the league. So that would be a loss. But, they're managing their cap. We heard that when they were talking about Anthony Caceres as well. So, it's hard to say too much without knowing what the numbers are behind the scenes. They are, however, releasing Max Burgess, though, Christian, who is being monitored by the Jets. There were some reports on Monday that he was even going to be a marquee signing. That is incorrect as per our understanding. It's just that maybe marquee was perhaps used as a bit of an emphasis rather than the technical understanding of like a $600,000 player contract or something like that. But he's a player that a lot of Sydney FC fans have been disappointed with the fact that he hasn't been a lot of, a part of a lot of the first team football the last 12 months under Ufuk Talay. And for him, I mean, he's 30 years old now. He wants first team football.
Yeah, I think even going back to the days of West United, he had a lot of talent and potential, right? Made that move to Sydney, showed a good few bright sparks, but never really fully developed into the player we thought he could be. And that went as well with the competition that he has to deal with at the moment at Sydney. And he's probably thinking of it as, make a move to Newcastle Jets. Yes, a struggling club a bit, but you get a bit more game time, a chance to make a name for yourself. That's probably the direction he's probably heading in. So I think for him it'd be a good move. It'd be a good move for all parties, really, for Sydney to offload him. If they're not really going to use him, then why keep him, right? Why force a player to stay when they're not happy? So I think it's good for all parties. I don't think anyone can complain.
I can't believe he's 30. That's crazy.
Another analogy came to me just
thought he was
as you were
younger,
saying that,
yeah.
Christian. Exactly.
It's
I
the
think a lot
opposite
of
of
people would
Thurgate.
be anti-Angus Thurgate. Everyone thinks Thurgate's, been around for so long, and he's so old, but he's only 24 or something like that.
Yeah.
And Max Burgess, it feels like he's just been perpetually a young talent in the league, and all of a sudden he's got a 3 at the start of his age. It's a bit of a shock.
That's
but yes,
crazy.
you're right on my wavelength there. Well done. All right. Well, if you want to keep up to date with all of the latest rumours, Jacob, do you have any extras for us? Because you're taking charge of our little rumour mill weekly update on the Roundball Australia website.
Nothing massive other than Craig Goodwin. I think we touched on him on Thursday as being a possibility of coming back. It's basically confirmed now. Everywhere is reporting that he will be back for Adelaide next season, so that's a massive get for them. But lots of just little rumours flying around. Anthony Caceres, has been a few clubs. Auckland are one that are looking at him. MacArthur as well, as Paletti reported on. So there's a few things going on. But yeah, keep your eye out on my for my article, because I'll be breaking them all down and letting you know what's going on in silly season. So yeah, look forward to it.
Absolutely. Keep an eye on the socials and the website during the off season. The other selection issue that we have to deal with tonight, Tony Popovich has named 23 players for a camp up in Abu Dhabi in the UAE for players specifically out of season when this squad was announced. So a lot of the kind of notable absences, the names that aren't on the list that you might recognise, for most of them, the reason is they are still have commitments with their club to end the season. So that's the reason why a lot of those names aren't there. This is, of course, in the lead up to massive World Cup qualifiers next month against Japan in Perth, and then away to Saudi Arabia to hopefully secure automatic qualification to the 2026 North America World Cup. Max Ballard, Nicholas Milanovic, Nectar Triantis, and interesting Paul Ocon-Engstler, a part of the uncapped young talent. The other name that a lot of people would have been calling for that can't be explained by club commitments is Adrian Segacic. He apparently, per Vince Rugari, who did some digging after this announcement, is playing in the ASEAN All-Stars. So that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Is playing for that team against Manchester United in a friendly. It's unclear which came first, the chicken or the egg, whether he was not selected by the Socceroos and then this opportunity came up, or it was vice versa, but that's what he'll be doing during this time. But I think, Christian, particularly some of those young names, Max Ballard and Triantis have received call-ups before, but have never really had the opportunity to shine with first-team football. Obviously, this still can't happen here, but it's good to see them reselected. And then Nicholas Milanovic is another young name that's been, obviously he's had a standout season in the A-League, and a lot of people have been calling for his inclusion as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Max Ballard, for example, how many times have we been calling for him to be selected? It's like, what does the kid have to do to earn a call-up? And these camps offer that chance to show yourself, right? To prove that, you deserve that call-up and to be in contention for selection for the World Cup qualifiers. So, very exciting for those 23 players. Obviously, some names in there which we already know are going to be in this squad definitely for the last 2 qualifiers in June. But it just goes to show that Popovich is using every opportunity possible to try and galvanize these players, to try and get some camps in, get some minutes, get some reps, try and focus on different things that, let's face it, he doesn't have time throughout most of the year, right? It's only when he gets his camp in, throughout 1 week before, or not even before a qualifying match. So then even then, you've got players traveling in from Europe a couple of days late. It's hard to get the whole team together. So, to have this camp in over there, obviously in warm weather in Abu Dhabi, it's going to be, a good test, I guess, for those players there, especially those youngsters who are trying to prove themselves. It'll be good for Popovich to see, the talent and the disposal that he's got. It should be good.
The other name here that is definitely worth talking about, Paul Ocon-Engstler. if you hadn't worked it out, the son of Paul Ocon. Jacob, I know a lot of people, the reaction to this was probably for a lot actually was, who is this guy? He was a very crucial part of the under-20 success in the Asian Cup. He was, for me, the player of the tournament. I know Alex Badalato won that award, and very well deserved as well. But Paul is just the player that sits at the base of midfield. He is the metronome of a football team, controls the tempo, is the springboard moving the ball forward, and just has a football IQ way, way beyond his years. And look, this is a training camp. The idea is to experiment and learn more. I think if you have an under-20 team that is winning a continental trophy, Tony Popovic is more than within his rights to have a look at, for me, the best player of that team.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to shout out Football Manager as well for making me aware of him before the rest of you. Back in the day, where you scroll through all the Australian players, and I just came across, I was like, that's a familiar name. Oh, it's his son. But he's a tremendous player, like you said. He's one of those players that he does a lot of the underappreciated sort of dirty work for a team that is the reason why they have success. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty and put in some hard yards. And, that means that the players, further up the pitch, maybe are going to have a lot more success, and they're going to take the highlights and the plaudits. But he's the one that's really just keeping the team together and doing a lot of the work. He's a tremendous talent to watch. And I think what we see from him that we don't see a lot from in terms of Australian midfielders that are coming through is kind of, I suppose, that IQ that you mentioned there, Lockie, where he just almost has that sixth sense of knowing not just what to do at any given moment, but what's going to happen in, 10 or 15 seconds time, where he needs to move, the pass that needs to be played, which players are going to be free, how the opposition press is going to look. So those sorts of things that you can spend a lot of time on with a player to try and make right. But if they just have that natural ability to identify those things in the first place, they're going to go a long way in their careers. And I think for Ocon Engstler, that's exactly what we're seeing now. He's being given these opportunities now with this senior setup. Obviously it's just a training squad, but it's a chance to prove himself as one of the big up and coming names in the midfield and in that sixth slot where, maybe there's not been as much talent as there has been in other spots on the pitch. So it's a chance to really nail himself in for, these big tournaments coming up, the World Cup next year. Even he could make the squad for that if he continues to prove himself. So no, I think it's well deserved to see him there. I'm really excited to see what he can do moving forwards. He's still very young, but he's so talented. And having a player like that who can drop into the six, and it means you don't have to play a double pivot. It means you can have an extra player forward. Like he just enables so much flexibility with the way that you want to play, and that's such an underrated quality to have as a footballer. So yeah, really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, you'd still consider him an outsider to even make the squad for the upcoming World Cup qualifiers, but very deserved talent, very up and coming player there. One person who is not on this list, however, we can get a little bit excited about, again, Christian, is Alessandro Ciccati. Haven't said that name in a little while because he did his ACL back in September, but I think I've still got the pronunciation down pat because he's already back playing 8 months later, which is pretty good for an ACL recovery. He played 90 minutes in Parma's 0-0 draw against Napoli, who are top of Serie A at the moment, and he's been in matchday squads for a month as well. So his recovery has come along very quickly. He is definitely one of the biggest Australian footballing talents going around at the moment. So very exciting to see him back playing first-team football, and maybe also, now that he's played 90 minutes, an outside chance for selection in these qualifiers coming up as well.
Yeah, time's absolutely flown by when you think about it. Like we were just chatting to him, 8-9 months ago, just before that unfortunate ACL injury. It was a good chat with him, discussing how he came up through the ranks and his time at Parma. And then, like I said, that really saddened ACL injury where you just don't wish upon anyone. But it's been good to have 8 months already back into action. I don't know if you guys saw the game, probably not, but he actually decided essentially the Scudetto race between Napoli and Inter. So Ciccati got fouled in the 90th minute. I think it was Giovanni Simeone. Ciccati got fouled, and if it wasn't for that, Napoli would have gotten a penalty. And referee went to VAR and it got overturned. So pretty cool moment where an Australian sort of decides the title race in Italy. I thought, that was pretty sick.
Massive for him. And look, I'd be doing a disservice to your heritage, Christian, if I didn't return to you with the very exciting news that I know you've gotten a lot of joy out of today. Is that AC Milan going to Perth for an international friendly. Obviously, friendlies are what they are. You can take what you want from them, but I know you're very happy about them coming to Australian shores again.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'd be happy if it was 20 years ago and we had, the best team in the world, but now, we're sitting ninth in Serie A. It's not looking pretty at the moment. We're versing Perth Glory. And then, I know, it's like, who are the underdogs here? Is it Perth or Milan?
Could be a tough test then. Could be a tough test, Christian.
I know, that's the worrying part. Are we going to get embarrassed, or I'm not too sure what to expect. But, I mean, it's good for the fans over there in Perth. I mean, we saw Milan come over there at Optus Stadium last year for that friendly against Roma, and the trip makes sense, right? Flying over from Italy, Perth is obviously the shortest distance. If you're going to travel to Australia, why not make it Perth? So I think they've sort of made it their home now. The tradition for every pre-season, it looks like, which is good for the Perth fans because, they're getting World Cup qualifying games for the Socceroos. They're getting some really major sporting events over there. So to get this coup as well, it's great for Perth in general and Western Australia.
Very good. All right, that'll do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Jacob Stevens, thank you very much for your time today.
Cheers, Lockie.
Christian, buongiorno. See you later.
Ciao, Lockie.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate everyone listening at home. Thank you for your time as well. We'll be back on Friday to talk Ange. It's going to be a big game Thursday morning. I'm going to be up at 5 a.m. watching it. I'm an Arsenal fan. I don't care. I'm cheering for him. Jacob doesn't care, but that's okay. He can revel in his little hate
I'll
watch.
complain.
And Christian is very heavily on the Tottenham side, definitely with Inter Milan as the opposition, of course. But that'll be fun. We're, of course, going to preview the second legs of
Inter
the
Milan
semi-finals.
is playing Tottenham.
Oh, sorry, Manchester United. I've flipped between the Champions League. I've just actually tried to forget as much as I can about the Champions League competition.
Yeah.
I was so confused there. I was like, have I missed something? Did Inter get relegated?
I did a whole big whole thing on the podcast about it as well. Sorry, I've just tried to eliminate the Champions League from my mind. It's not working too well. But we'll be back on Friday. Europa League, Tottenham, Man U, Ange Ball, A-League semi-finals. There we go. Got it out of the way. Thank you again for your time. We appreciate your company. We'll see you then. Goodbye.